Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Cradle Bytes, which is the Cradle podcast shorter versions to bring you updates on sometimes a daily basis, what's going on in Lebanon, what's going on in the region, what's going on in the regional war. So with that, let me welcome Sima Tayyim, head of content creation and media at The Cradle.
Hello. So we have a lot going on. I'm going to try to give just like a very brief rundown of what some of the latest developments are. We had this morning at around 6:30 a.m. A surface-to-surface ballistic missile was launched by Hezbollah for the first time since the start of this war. It is the Qadir-1, and it targeted a Mossad headquarters that is actually where Israel's pager terror attack originated and where the assassination of resistance leaders and commanders is planned. And this is according to a statement. So we are seeing the implementation of the Tel Aviv for Beirut equation. Whether the ballistic missile reached its target or not is irrelevant at this point. It's a message and the start of, well, not a start, but the manifestation of this new phase that we are in. And this comes after Hezbollah carried out nearly 20 operations yesterday, launching 400 rockets in one day. That is the highest number of rockets launched in one day since Hezbollah opened its support front for Gaza back on 8 October 2023. We saw Safad on fire. We saw direct impacts in and around Safad and in and around Haifa. Rosh Pina, which is a neighboring city of Safad, houses and infrastructure damaged. Settlers complaining, asking where is the Iron Dome because Hezbollah is bypassing air defenses. So, Hezbollah's firepower and range have increased drastically amid these massacres being carried out across Lebanon by Israel. And this comes after Israel falsely claimed it had taken out like 50% of Hezbollah's missile capabilities. But we haven't really seen Hezbollah's capabilities yet. So this killing machine is murdering actually entire families across Lebanon and claiming that it's in Hezbollah targets. And several people were killed in Beirut yesterday when Israel targeted Ghbeiri near the southern suburb of Beirut, and also assassinating another Hezbollah commander, Ibrahim Qubaisi, Haj Abu Musa. And we now see them targeting new areas in and around Beirut and the north and Mount Lebanon. And they also targeted the Shuf, June in the Shuf, killing at least 4 people. And actually the Shuf is an area where people fleeing the south have fled to. So that kind of also looks like a repeat of Gaza, where you tell people to flee and then bomb the areas they fled to. They also targeted Jiye in Mount Lebanon and Mount Lebanon. So that's where we are really. And meanwhile, Benjamin Netanyahu is meant to speak at the UN tomorrow, supposedly. But, we know that, as we've discussed earlier, Israel's goal is not to return the settlers to the north, but to escalate. And, the Washington Post had an article saying that Netanyahu may have been reluctant to enter into a full-scale battle before. But now analysts are saying that it might be just what he needs. And we've been saying this for ages. There are risks, but there are advantages. But, there are also Israeli officials complaining that the strategy in the north is not clear. But he wants to delay an October 7 investigation. He wants more time he wants to lose time, and he wants to try and rebuild his reputation. He wants to shift attention away from the hostage situation, refusing to accept that Gaza and Lebanon are tied to each other. And this escalation looks to me more like a desire to ethnically cleanse South Lebanon. I mean, that's how I see it as an ultimate goal. But we know that, Israel's not going to be able to carry out any of its stated goals. And again, I don't think these stated goals are the real goals. As we've discussed, the real goals are to cause destruction and raise what they can to the ground. So go ahead, Sharmina. I want to get your thoughts on this.
I mean, for me, we've just come off of a week where it just was, Lebanon took one hit after another by the Israelis. And I think for a lot of our viewers and the global community, it looked like Israel was, winning something, okay? But yesterday, we saw genuinely that Hezbollah expanded the circle of fire. There were 18 massive strikes by Hezbollah yesterday, all of them using rockets except for one, which used drones. So the circle of fire suddenly overnight expanded to hit multiple Israeli settlements, barracks, military bases, and some of them multiple times. So, Israel has had a media blackout. We don't get to see the fallout from these strikes. We don't get to hear about, soldiers and Israeli military personnel, et cetera, who have died. We don't get to see the fires, the destruction of buildings and infrastructure. But on the Lebanese side, there is no media blackout, and we get to see everything in great detail. And that is certainly a perception play that Israel wants, so that it can consistently make its domestic constituents feel as though Israel is scoring a lot of wins across the board. Look, its stated goal in Lebanon, and I really urge people to watch the podcast from Monday, the extended podcast. The stated goal in Lebanon is to get the settlers back into the north. This is the one goal on the Lebanese war front that the Israelis have declared. That is the opposite of what is happening now, okay? Last week, the week before, they were beating their chests about, we are going to get our settlers back home. They didn't care about it for a whole year, and all of a sudden they decided after a security cabinet meeting that this was going to be the goal, and they were going to go ahead on the Lebanese front. It is the opposite of what's happening. Israeli settlers are rushing daily in the hundreds of thousands to bomb shelters. Okay, their days are upended. Night or day, they don't know when danger is coming. There's a real fear factor among these populations, and Hezbollah is now hitting deeper and deeper into Israeli territory and moving into new targets, for instance, settlements with more frequency. Netanyahu is going to pay a political price for this when this fact becomes overwhelmingly apparent to all Israelis, which I think already in the last few days is starting to set in, because not only will settlers not go back to their homes as he promised, but more and more Israelis are being displaced now. So now Israel, in this last week, with its multiple strikes on Lebanon, especially in the last few days, claims to have neutered, and taken out 30, 40, 50%. The numbers vary from, official to official, from analyst to analyst, to have neutered a significant percentage of Hezbollah's military capabilities and its munitions, its missile stocks, and also has made great show of assassinating a variety of Hezbollah military commanders, all for the purpose of defeating Hezbollah. But none of these things have either stopped the command and control of the Lebanese resistance, the function, the command and control function of the resistance, nor has it interrupted Hezbollah's ability to strike constantly and regularly, sometimes within minutes, in a retaliatory strike against Israel. Also, I think increasingly people are seeing that Israel is specifically targeting Lebanese civilians and other civilians in southern Lebanon, in eastern Lebanon, in different parts of Lebanon, in Mount Lebanon Christian area, under the pretext that they're targeting either Hezbollah rank and file or members or supporters, or that they're targeting specific facilities, which are all, by the way, residences, homes, where they claim, through that ridiculous video they put out a few days ago, that residents are hoarding missiles in their living room. But Hezbollah is targeting legitimate targets and responding proportionately. Today, as you mentioned, Seema, Israel hit Kisarwan under the pretext of targeting a Shia cleric, who was with Hezbollah. This is a non-military official, which is a violation of Geneva Conventions right there. But this is a Christian part of the country, Mount Lebanon. It is the Christian Mecca. And this this is something I've been saying since October 8th, that, when people were talking about Israel launching war in Lebanon, this is one of Israel's unstated goal, to target Christian areas, neighborhoods, towns, and villages, areas that they have avoided in past wars. The reason that Israel will do this, in my view, is to get Christian communities to blame Hezbollah and create civil strife and even a civil war, potentially, that can hinder Hezbollah from behind, from its left, from its right. Now, in the past, when Israel has hit Shia areas to turn residents against Hezbollah, even those who are not supporters, and especially those who are not supporters, this has never worked, okay? Because people understand that the bombs are coming from Israel, not from Hezbollah. So my question really on this is, because I do see this coming, and yes, like you said today, we've seen this in Kisarwan area in Mount Lebanon. Will Lebanese Christians blame Hezbollah when they see that this is a clear Israeli strategy to divide and conquer, and that these are ultimately Israeli bombs that are falling on their heads and destroying their homes and killing their families? Will they rush to Mother France, the mentor of Christians in this country, and demand pressure on Israel, which splits France off from the UN Security Council permanent 5 members, or permanent 3, which is France, the UK, and the US, that is always supporting Israel in all UN Security Council resolutions? These are all questions that remain. We will see if the targeting of minority areas, Christian areas, non-Shia areas, so Sunni areas, Christian areas, Druze areas will escalate, as I believe it will. But, to take a step back from even Monday, when it just looked devastating what was happening to Lebanon, hundreds of thousands of Lebanese have been displaced. Seema, you can give us some numbers on the most recent numbers on the confirmed death toll and injuries. Do you have any of that?
The last number that I saw was 569 martyrs and nearly 2,000 injured, but many of the injured are in critical condition.
Yeah. So I want us to look at a picture of what I call a military escalation ladder. This is really important. Sometimes visualizing what you're saying goes a long way to making as many words unnecessary. In this ladder, Israel is at what I'd call 80%. It is near maximum capacity. After a year of conflict, its troops are exhausted. Israel, besides Hamas, Israel is the only party to this conflict that has its troops and fighters on the front line in the battlefield, and has done so from almost, from the earliest point of this conflict. So its troops are exhausted. It has a lot of reservists in play. Israel is a small country with a small population, so it can't count on an infinite and never-ending supply of fighters to replace its rank and file. Its munitions have been depleted since the first month. It is now reliant entirely on daily U.S. shipments to replenish these stores. Its economy is battered. Its ports are either disabled or at minimum capacity. Its residents displaced and running to shelters, and a buffer zone for the first time ever has been created deep inside Israel by Hezbollah in the north of the country that threatens to deepen with each day that Israel does not stop its war in Gaza. Look at Hezbollah, which I've put on this escalation ladder at less than 50% capacity. Its frontline troops are not engaged with the enemy at all, okay? So no exhaustion there. It has millions of volunteers from around the region, okay, from around West Asia, from Iran, from Iraq, from Yemen, from Syria, and elsewhere, who have pledged to come join the fight if a ground war is launched by Israel, as it threatens to do now every day. Hezbollah's missiles are used sparingly and calculatingly, okay? So, Israel just carpet bombs, and Hezbollah goes like today, in almost a year, it's for the first time today used a ballistic missile in its, and this is an early missile of this type, of this variety, okay? So there are potentially further improvements on this system, but it was a message to the military: go further into our depth, and we will go further into your depth, and we will use different kinds of weapons now. Even if Israel says we've disabled 50% of Hezbollah's missile and rocket capabilities and destroyed them and destroyed launch pads, etc., Hezbollah has shown that it can react immediately. None of that. It doesn't seem hindered at all by what Israel claims, and that it is now employing more superior and more sophisticated munitions technologies against Israelis. The other thing is Hezbollah now has more, 10 times the troops, the fighters, and 10 times the weapons that it had in 2006 when it first depleted in 33 days, then defeated Israel. So what are you talking about? We take out half of Hezbollah's inventory, Israel. You literally are still fighting 5 times the amount that you were fighting in 2010. Now, Israel, one Hezbollah missile in the right place can cause tens of thousands of settlers to flee. Imagine if 10 ballistic missiles were used in 10 different places. Can Israel keep functioning, or does it go into an internal emergency mode, in which it can't cope with these battles on 3 direct border fronts, and then further ones? If, again, looking at the escalation ladder, Yemen and Iraq are lobbing projectiles. I believe we have some confirmation from the Israelis that the Iraqis have successfully sent drones without being intercepted into Israeli airspace. Yes. So that's a new thing. And these are obviously drones that, armed drones, weaponized drones. Neither Yemen or Iraq are on the front lines. They are periodically joining in on, with one of the frontline states or entities or non-state actors to, keep Israel's defense systems employed on too many fronts. Okay. A very smart tactic. It has plenty. Both Yemen and Iraq have plenty they can do. Iraq less so because of their military, the sophistication of their military hardware and munitions. Yemen, a lot more sophisticated. Yemen, unbelievably, has sent both a ballistic missile, a hypersonic missile, right, and an armed drone that have hit Tel Aviv. Okay. So these are 2 players on the escalation ladder that have so much further to go. Iran is the lowest on the escalation ladder because we've only seen 1 major salvo from Iran. But as we saw in April when Iran launched, its salvo against Israel, which consisted of hundreds of missiles and drones, and necessitated Israel's help from its allies and proxies, the UK, the US, France, the Jordanians, that 1 salvo was sufficient to shut up Israel for quite a long time. It doesn't need to do it yet. Iran doesn't need to do it yet because its allies have absolute capability still themselves. It will do another grand operation because it has promised to do so that will look different from its last one. And it will do it only when needed, okay?
Well, yeah, I wanted to talk about that because, you have people who don't understand the nature of asymmetric warfare. They see massacres, they see Israel's shock and awe tactic. And as you said, Israel's used all its cards, but we've only just begun. And so these massacres blind people from being able to understand, let's say, Hezbollah's achievements on the front. And just like when Hamas was, in this, and other, of course, factions like Palestinian Islamic Jihad, when they were under the spotlight, people were asking, where's Hezbollah? Where's Hezbollah? Hezbollah's not doing enough. Now Hezbollah's under the spotlight. People are asking, where's Iran? Where's Iran? And well, yeah, like you said, it's not going to happen until it needs to happen. And unfortunately, massacres, if you see massacres, it doesn't mean that that needs to happen right now. This is asymmetric warfare, and people don't understand that. Not only foreigners don't understand that, people here don't understand that.
Because, Seema, we've been so conditioned by American-style warfare for decades to have an emotional reaction and then a big show of firepower, you know.
All right, but as we said, we can handle it. The Israelis cannot handle this. So what are they going to do? Are they going to end up opting for a deal? Or are they going to keep going and suffer? Because they're the ones who are going to suffer.
Don't forget, another thing that differentiates us from the Western kind of warfare that we've all been conditioned to expect is that the resistance axis seeks very, very much so to minimize civilian deaths and casualties in conflict, number one. The other thing is the resistance axis seeks to avoid war, all-out war, because all-out war means naturally a lot more casualties, because the resistance axis understands its enemy's mind very well. Its enemy only knows to do shock and awe. Its enemy, you know, the US, the Israelis, the unipolar axis have shown in all wars that they prefer to amass casualties. This gives them, their wars are public relations wars, whereas the Axis's wars are strategic wars, okay? We want to try to deter the enemy at every stage of escalation to calm things down and maybe have them recalculate. We have seen, though, in a year of conflict that Israel has been unable to recalculate. It's only escalated. And so now the resistance axis has risen to this new phase, this new level, where it needs to inflict pain on the Israelis, just enough so Israelis are deterred, and just enough to stop this from going into a full-out war, okay?
Yeah, I mean, one thing about that, exactly, inflicting pain on Israelis doesn't look like the pain that we endure and that's inflicted on us. So we know that they have underground cities and shelters and hospitals. You don't need to kill hundreds of Israeli settlers to inflict pain. All you have to do is break the image of safety and security in the heart of what is called Israel. And that's it. And that's why when you see people going, oh, well, oh, they launched this missile, well, how many people died? Oh, well, if no one died, then what, then nothing happened. You know, this kind of thing where it's like, that is so not the point. It's not the point.
There's a big component of psychological warfare in you know, the sort of the best and the ancient, like Sun Tzu, war strategies. Nothing that the West understands. I mean, what they try to do is censor media from reporting the facts, and then laying the scene, as they do again through their media outlets. And but you know, again, to turn back around, I think this is something our audiences are going to understand over time. As frustrating as it may be, the Axis does not respond emotionally. It can't afford to do so, because at its very core is a desire to minimize civilian casualties and therefore prevent an all-out war.
And because the whole world is against it. I mean, come on.
Well,
we don't get away with
that. But let's be honest, Seema, we have watched, you know, people go from, the axis of evil to like great Iran, great Hezbollah, great Hamas, great resistance.
No, by the world, I don't mean the people. I don't mean the people. Well, I mean the leaders. I mean, like, they want Iran to bomb Israel. They don't think that the West is going to form a coalition and bomb Iran if Iran bombs Israel whenever it wants.
Whatever they want. And we saw the emotions on the street in Lebanon. You know, we know, as you and I talked about this before, during our podcast, we let folks know that one of a Cradle staff member at the Cradle Arabic was, you know, had the house next to them blown up, and I think her brother is severely injured. Today we learned that 3 other Cradle Arabic social media folks have been injured over the last few days. 2 of them yesterday. One of whom, I mean, we sit down the hall from these guys, one whose wife was killed. So it's very real to us, and we see the emotions. And of course, with that kind of emotion, people are asking for reaction. But that's not how the Axis operates. So you are just going to have to wait and watch, because, you know, always remember this escalation ladder. Israel is at the very top of its escalation ladder. and each and every one of its adversaries have a long, long way to go. They are slowly trying to, as we always say, boil the Israeli frog while maintaining, injecting some sense into this conflict, some measuredness
with the access. It's just
to temper Israel and to train it to be tempered. Now, so while Israel plays a public relations war almost in its entirety, as you say, top Israeli current and former officials are complaining that there is no strategy in this current war, not from Gaza all the way to Lebanon, not on its other fronts either. So, while Israel plays a public relations war, hitting very hard, hoping it'll end soon if the hits are hard enough, and praying for its foes to surrender, the resistance axis is playing the long war. Time is on the side of the resistance axis. As Nasrallah and others in the axis have said many, many times, battles come and go. You win some, you lose some. But the one who wins the war is all that counts.
Yes. Well, that's a good place to wrap things up. And you can't expect the regional resistance not to fight back just because they, for example, don't have air defenses. Gaza is besieged. Don't think Gaza won't fight. The Lebanese army is practically not allowed to fight Israel. And don't expect Hezbollah to sit back and not fight just because, we don't have an army, essentially. Yeah. And don't blame the resistance for civilians being massacred. I mean, that's what I want to say.
In essence, we're over the hump of the emotional hump of last week. It continues. It's awful. Everyone's opening up their homes to people. I have 5 people in my home. Others at the Cradle are making phone calls like crazy. It's not just the Cradle, it's everybody. In Sunni areas, in Christian areas, in Druze areas, despite what the media tells you, many people across the country are opening up homes. But this is we are now over that hump. We've seen that the resistance is willing to step up, go further and further and further every day. Today's ballistic missile attack by Hezbollah set a new tone. I think we need to wrap up now. We will bring you more from Cradle Bytes in the next, hours or days. So keep a lookout for our videos. Thank you very much, folks.
Thank you, guys.